The fluorescent lights of the federal courtroom cast sharp shadows across the mahogany bench. Judge Thompson adjusted her reading glasses, lips pursed as she scanned the emergency petition before her. The morning had started like any other until Marcus Reynolds walked through those doors in a navy suit that fit too well for someone the defense clearly didn't recognize. Victoria Ashford sat rigid at the defendant's table, flanked by 4 attorneys whose collective hourly rate could fund a mortgage. Her fingers clutched the edge of the polished wood, knuckles bloodless. She had dressed for victory this morning, Armani blazer, pearl earrings that caught the light just so. The confidence she'd worn into the room now felt like a costume 2 sizes too small. The judge's voice cut through the silence with surgical precision. This emergency hearing concerns allegations of systematic fair housing violations against Preston and Associates and related entities. Mr. Reynolds, you may proceed. Marcus stood, and the courtroom seemed to shrink around him. His hands rested calmly on the leather portfolio before him. No tremor, no hesitation. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Thank you, Your Honor. I am Marcus Reynolds, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, and I represent 73 families who were denied housing based on the color of their skin. Victoria's lead counsel half rose from his chair. The motion aborted midway as the words registered. His mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish pulled from water. Beside him, Victoria had gone pale, to her eyes locked on Marcus's face as if trying to reconcile 2 impossible images: the security guard, the night janitor who mopped her floors. That's impossible, she whispered, but the courtroom acoustics carried it further than intended. Marcus met her gaze with the same steady calm he'd shown 3 months ago when she told him to use the service elevator. Good morning, Ms. Ashford. But 3 months ago, he had been invisible. The apartment smelled like burned toast and hope. Marcus scraped the blackened edges into the trash, trying not to wake Maya, but her voice drifted from the breakfast nook anyway. Dad, you know the toaster's been broken since February. She sat at the small table, gap-toothed smile bright despite the 6:15 a.m. hour, surrounded by poster board and model airplane parts. And the science fair project had consumed their kitchen for 2 weeks now, a miniature Boeing 747 taking shape among glue sticks and Wikipedia printouts. Engineers adapt, Marcus said, sliding the less burned half onto her plate. The rent notice on the counter caught his eye. $875 due in 5 days. The checking account balance mocked him from memory. $127. Maya poured milk with the concentration of a surgeon, then looked up with those eyes that were so much like Sarah's. It hurt. Dad, when will you come home from work? I mean, before I wake up. You're always tired. Always. The word landed like a stone in still water. Marcus knelt beside her chair, eye level, the way Sarah used to. Before you wake up, sweetheart. Always. The promise felt thin in his mouth, but Maya's smile widened. She pointed to the plane's wing assembly with a fork. I still don't get it. How do they stay up? I mean, metal's heavy. What if the engines stop? Sarah's photograph watched from the shelf above the sink, frozen in a moment 4 years gone. Car accident on Route 9, black ice, instant. The kind of sudden that doesn't let you prepare or say goodbye. Marcus had walked away from the U.S. Attorney's Office 3 months later. The choice between prosecution and parenthood rendered brutally simple. Lift, he said, touching the model's curved wing. The shape forces air to move faster over the top, creating lower pressure. The higher pressure underneath pushes up. It's called Bernoulli's Principle. Maya's eyes went wide. So they fly because of invisible pushing? Essentially. That's so cool. You know everything, Dad. If only. The bills on the counter told a different story. And the night security job at Preston Tower paid $16.50 an hour, enough to keep them fed, barely enough to keep them housed. But it meant he could drop Maya at school at 8:30 and be home by 8 a.m., sleep while she learned, pick her up at 3:45, help with homework, tuck her in by 9 o'clock, then put on the uniform and do it all again. 4 years ago, he'd made a choice: career or daughter. The photograph of Sarah seemed to nod approval from across the room. Preston Tower gleamed against the pre-dawn sky, 47 stories of glass and steel and money. Marcus pushed through the service entrance at 10:55 p.m., already exhausted but practiced at hiding it. The uniform, navy polyester with security embroidered in gold, hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight these past years. The overnight shift supervisor barely looked up from his crossword. Reynolds, floors 15 through 20 tonight. Corporate complained about fingerprints on the 18th floor conference table. Understood. The elevator to the office levels played soft jazz that couldn't mask the mechanical hum. Marcus watched the numbers climb, his reflection fragmented in the polished doors, a middle-aged black man in a uniform designed to make him disappear. Most nights, it worked perfectly. The 17th floor belonged to Preston and Associates, and even at 11:30 p.m., it smelled like money. Original artwork lined the hallways, each piece worth more than Marcus made in 6 months. The receptionist's desk held a vase of white roses that would wilt and be replaced before anyone thought about their cost. Marcus moved through the space with methodical efficiency, emptying trash bins, wiping down surfaces, on straightening chairs. The conference room table gleamed under his cloth, but his attention kept drifting to the filing cabinets along the north wall, the ones labeled Applications Residential. He'd been patient. 2 years of building trust, of being the reliable overnight man who never missed a shift, who never asked questions, who blended into the expensive furniture. 2 years since Maya's application to 3 different Preston-owned apartment buildings had been rejected with form letters about current resident compatibility standards. The third filing cabinet opened without resistance. Inside, manila folders stood in neat rows, organized by property address and date. Marcus photographed 12 files with his phone before the supervisor's footsteps echoed from the hallway. By the time the man appeared, Marcus was wiping down the cabinet handles. "Good work, Reynolds. Keep it up." "Always do." The shift ended at 7 a.m. sharp. Marcus clocked out, exhaustion settling into his bones like morning frost. But he needed to stop by the main building to return cleaning supplies to the storage closet. The service entrance put him near the main lobby elevators, and at 7:15 on a Thursday morning, the building was just starting to wake. He pressed the call button for the parking garage level. The doors opened immediately. So did the doors of the second elevator, 20 feet away. Victoria Ashford stepped out surrounded by 3 associates, all young, all white, all wearing suits that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. She was in mid-conversation, gesturing with a leather portfolio, her voice carrying across the marble lobby. "I want the 3rd Street property cleared by month's end. The current tenants are—" She saw Marcus. Her hand moved fractionally, clutching her Prada bag closer to her body. The gesture was small, automatic, and completely involuntary, the kind of thing people don't even realize they're doing. Her lead associate followed her gaze, then stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Excuse me, the service elevator is in the back corridor. This one's for residents and corporate staff." Marcus kept his voice level, his face neutral, the mask he'd perfected over 2 decades of courtrooms and 4 years of survival. "I'm finishing my shift, heading to the parking garage, same as anyone else." Victoria's expression hardened into something that might have been concern but looked more like irritation. Security personnel use designated elevators. It's company policy for everyone's comfort. The policy manual, Section 3.7, states all employees may use main elevators outside business hours. It's 7:15 a.m. Business hours begin at 8 o'clock. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria's eyes narrowed, reassessing, but not in the way Marcus had hoped. Her voice dropped into that particular register wealthy white women use when their authority gets questioned. "I don't recall asking for your interpretation of policy." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Marcus gestured toward it. "Of course. Have a good morning." He stepped inside. After a pause, weighted with something between discomfort and social obligation, Victoria and her entourage followed. The doors closed on 7 people occupying 20 square feet, in the air thick with perfume and unspoken hierarchies. The youngest associate fumbled with his leather portfolio, and files spilled across the elevator floor in a cascade of paper. Fair Housing Act complaint forms scattered like leaves. Marcus knelt, gathering them before the man could react, his eyes catching fragments of text. Application denied. Insufficient community alignment. Tenant profile does not match established resident demographics. Credit approved, but unit availability reconsidered. 23 forms, all stamped, resolved, NDA signed. Marcus handed them back, making sure his fingers brushed the header of the top document where it read, Fair Housing Act, Section 804, Violation Allegation. Careful. Section 804 violations carry heavy penalties, up to $150,000 for a pattern or practice finding. The associate froze mid-reach. Victoria's head snapped toward Marcus, her expression shifting from annoyance to something sharper. She studied his face like she was seeing him for the first time, trying to place how a night security guard knew federal housing law citation numbers. The elevator stopped at the garage level. Marcus stepped out, nodding once. "Have a good day, Ms. Ashford." The doors closed on her face, confusion and calculation warring behind her eyes. The Toyota Camry had 187,000 miles, and a check engine light that had been on so long, Marcus considered it decorative. He sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine, laptop balanced on the steering wheel, running off battery power he couldn't afford to fully recharge. On the spreadsheet filled the screen in neat columns and color-coded rows. 2 years of work distilled into data. 73 families. 6 years of Preston and Associates application records, painstakingly reconstructed from photographed files, public records requests, and interviews with rejected tenants who thought no one would ever believe them. The pattern emerged with mathematical certainty. Black applicants with an average annual income of $67,000, 13% approval rate. White applicants averaging $52,000, 91% approval rate. Marcus added Victoria's leaked complaint files to a separate tab. Each NDA represented a family who'd been paid to stay quiet, amounts ranging from $5,000 to $25,000. Cheaper than a lawsuit, more effective than reform. His phone buzzed. Maya's school, the caller ID flashing like an alarm. "Mr. Reynolds." But this is Principal Morrison. There's been an incident with Maya. Can you come in? His hands tightened on the steering wheel, leather creaking under his grip. What kind of incident? Another parent said something inappropriate during pickup. Maya defended herself. We need you to come discuss it. The principled tone, the careful word choice. Marcus had heard variations of this conversation too many times. Maya's spark, her refusal to shrink herself, kept colliding with a world determined to make her smaller. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and stared at the spreadsheet one more time. 73 families. 6 years of coordinated discrimination. And now his daughter, 8 years old with a gap-toothed smile and questions about airplanes, caught in the same machinery. The laptop screen dimmed to save power. All in the reflection, Marcus saw the security uniform, saw the exhaustion, saw the weight of choices made 4 years ago bearing down. But he also saw something else. The man who'd once stood in federal court and made corporations answer for their sins. The man Sarah had believed in, even when he didn't believe in himself. He started the engine. The check engine light glowed steady and familiar. But he didn't know what waited at home. The elementary school parking lot felt smaller than it should. Cars packed tight like the parents didn't trust open space. Marcus found Maya on the bench outside the principal's office, swinging her legs, that gap-toothed smile nowhere in evidence. She looked up when his shadow crossed her sneakers. Hi, Dad. Hey, baby. What happened? Principal Morrison appeared before Maya could answer. To her expression caught between sympathy and institutional obligation. The kind of face administrators wear when they know something's wrong, but policy manuals don't cover how to fix it. Mr. Reynolds, thank you for coming so quickly. Perhaps we should speak in my office. I'd like Maya to tell me first. Maya's fingers twisted the hem of her shirt, her voice smaller than he'd heard in months. Mrs. Henderson said we couldn't afford to live in her neighborhood. She said your job is appropriate for your background. The words landed with surgical precision. Appropriate. Background. Code words that sounded reasonable until you understood what they really meant. Mrs. Henderson is a parent? Principal Morrison shifted her weight, uncomfortable. She's also a real estate agent. She was discussing property values with another parent when Maya overheard. I didn't just overhear. I asked her what she meant, and she said some people are meant for service jobs and some people build wealth. Then she looked right at me. Marcus knelt in front of his daughter, eye level, hands gentle on her shoulders. What did you do? I told her you're the smartest person I know. That you help me with homework that her kids probably can't even do. And that service jobs are important because without them, people like her wouldn't have anyone to look down on. Pride and heartbreak mixed in Marcus's chest, indistinguishable from each other. 8 years old and already learning to fight battles she shouldn't have to fight. Then she called me disrespectful and said I needed to learn my place. Principal Morrison cleared her throat. To be fair, Maya did raise her voice. To be fair, Marcus interrupted, his tone still calm but edged with something harder. An adult told my daughter to learn her place, and you're concerned about her volume? The principal's face colored. I've spoken to Mrs. Henderson about appropriate language. But I did want you to know that Maya's reaction was spirited. Good, it should be. Marcus pulled Maya into a hug, feeling her arms wrap tight around his neck. Over her shoulder, he caught sight of the bulletin board in the hallway, real estate flyers for family housing in the district. 3 of them bore the Preston and Associates logo. Principal Morrison, which agency does Mrs. Henderson work for? I'm not sure that's relevant. Preston and Associates? The pause told him everything. Yes, but surely that's coincidental. Nothing about Preston is coincidental. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table while Maya worked through math problems with fierce concentration, as if solving for X could solve everything else too. His laptop glowed with spreadsheets and scanned documents, 2 years of investigation compressed into rows and columns that told stories people didn't want to hear. Maya looked up from long division, pencil paused mid-calculation. Dad, why do people think we're different? The question hung in the small kitchen, too large for the space. Marcus closed the laptop, giving her his full attention. We're not different, baby. Some people just forgot how to see clearly. But why did they forget? Was it on purpose? Sarah's photograph watched from the shelf, her smile frozen in a moment when the world made more sense. Or maybe it never made sense, and Marcus had just been too busy to notice. Sometimes people are scared, he said carefully. Scared that if everyone gets treated fairly, they'll lose something. So they create rules that feel fair, but aren't. They use polite words to hide ugly thoughts. Maya's pencil tapped against her notebook, thinking, Is that why you work at night? To figure out their rules? Something like that. Mom would want you to fight, right? Even if it's scary? The question caught Marcus off guard. Not because Maya was wrong, but because she was so completely right. Sarah had never backed down from a fight worth having, never let fear override principle. It's part of what made her a good nurse, what made her a good mother, what made Marcus miss her so much some mornings he could barely breathe. Yes, she would. Maya returned to her homework, satisfied with the answer. But Marcus stared at Sarah's photograph a moment longer, making silent promises to a woman who'd been gone 4 years, but whose voice still guided every decision. Tomorrow, he'd take the next step. Tonight, he just needed to be Dad. Victoria Ashford's office occupied the northwest corner of the 17th floor, windows offering views that cost extra in rent and psychology. She stood with her back to the door, phone pressed to her ear, watching traffic crawl through downtown like blood through narrowing arteries. I don't care if he knew Section 804. Run the background check again. Deeper this time. Her HR director, Janet Kim, was sat in the guest chair with a file folder that had grown noticeably thicker since their last conversation. Inside, complaint forms created a paper trail Victoria had spent 6 years trying to bury. We ran it twice. Marcus Reynolds, 42, high school diploma from Jefferson County, no criminal record, no red flags. He's just a security guard. Security guards don't quote federal housing law chapter and verse. Janet opened the folder, revealing forms Victoria had seen too many times to count, each one a family asking why, each one settled with enough money to make them stop asking. We have 4 new complaints this week, same pattern, and the federal government is reviewing fair housing practices across the region. Victoria finally turned from the window, to her expression hardening into something that looked like determination but felt more like fear. Our legal team has managed complaints for 6 years without incident. We follow protocol. The protocol is the problem, Victoria. We're rejecting qualified applicants using language that sounds neutral but isn't. We're maintaining property values. That's our fiduciary responsibility to investors. The phrase came out automatic, rehearsed, the kind of justification Victoria had told herself so many times it almost felt true. Her parents had immigrated from Poland with $200 and a belief that hard work meant something. She'd built Preston from 3 buildings to 17, created wealth her parents couldn't have imagined. But somewhere along the way, protecting that wealth had become more important than remembering why it mattered. Janet closed the folder with deliberate care. That security guard has been photographing files after hours. I checked the server logs. Someone's been accessing application databases from terminals that should be locked. Do we have proof it's him? No, but he's the only person with overnight access to this floor who'd know what to look for. Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from her lead attorney. Board meeting 4 p.m. They're asking questions. Fire him, Victoria said. Today, create whatever paperwork you need. On what grounds? Insubordination, violation of elevator policy. I don't care. Make it clean and make it fast. Janet stood, the folder tucked under her arm like evidence at a trial that hadn't started yet. This won't make the investigation go away. It'll buy us time. But time for what? Victoria couldn't say. Time to cover tracks already exposed? Time to find better language for the same discrimination? Time to pretend she didn't know exactly what her company had been doing since she inherited it from her mentor 7 years ago? The city sprawled beyond her windows, thousands of buildings filled with people making choices that added up to who they'd become. Victoria wondered for just a moment when her choices had stopped feeling like choices and started feeling like inevitabilities. Marcus met Rosa Martinez at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Preston Tower, far enough that corporate surveillance wouldn't catch them, close enough that Rosa could make it during her lunch break. She looked older than 52, the kind of aging that comes from carrying secrets that weigh more than years. Her hands shook as she slid the USB drive across the table. 7 years of application data. Every rejection, every approval, every note in the system that wasn't supposed to exist. Marcus pocketed the drive without examining it. Trust worked both ways. Why now? I have a daughter, too. She's 15. Last week, she asked me what I do for a living, and I couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't say I help maintain systems that would reject families like hers if we didn't live in company housing. The coffee between them cooled, neither drinking, the cups just props in a conversation about culpability and courage. They'll know it came from you, Marcus said. I know, but I can't sleep anymore. Can't look at myself. 7 years of telling families they're not good enough. And every single time, it was a lie. Marcus thought of Maya asking why people think we're different. Thought of 73 families who'd believed those lies because the lies came from people with authority and nice offices and coded language that sounded almost reasonable. What you're doing matters, he said quietly. More than you know. Rosa's eyes glistened. Will it be enough? It's a start. The data on Rosa's drive painted pictures no defense attorney could explain away. Marcus spent 3 days analyzing it, cross-referencing with public records, building statistical models that showed discrimination so consistent it could only be intentional. Approval rates by race and income level mapped across 6 years told a story. Wealth didn't matter. Qualifications didn't matter. Credit scores didn't matter. Only skin color created predictable outcomes. He interviewed more families, each one adding details that built toward critical mass. An elderly black man, retired teacher, 42 years in the classroom. They said I didn't meet lifestyle requirements. I asked what that meant. They said the building had certain standards for resident activities and social integration. I'm 70 years old. I read books and watched birds. What standards could I possibly violate? A young couple, both engineers at aerospace firms, combined income pushing 6 figures. We submitted our application on a Tuesday. Wednesday morning, they called and said the unit was no longer available. Thursday, it was back online at the same price. When I called again, they said their system had glitched. Systems don't glitch like that. A single mother, with nurse practitioner, credit score north of 750. The leasing agent kept asking if I had family support, if there was a father involved, if I understood the financial commitment. She didn't ask those questions to the white couple who applied after me with worse credit. Each story alone might seem like misunderstanding. Together, they formed patterns that only willful blindness could miss. Marcus compiled everything into folders organized by violation type, by property, by year. Documentation so thorough even skeptical jurors would see the truth. Late on the third night, his phone rang. Thomas Chen, his former colleague at the U.S. Attorney's Office, the one person who'd understood why Marcus walked away after Sarah died. "Brother, you sure about this? You walked away for a reason. Good reason." Marcus stared at Maya's bedroom door. Oh, light leaking underneath, probably reading past bedtime again. "My daughter is being affected. I can't walk away twice." "What you're describing is major, Marcus. Federal civil rights violations, conspiracy, probably wire fraud if they took government money. You're talking about destroying a company. I'm talking about justice. Same thing in this case." Thomas paused, the sound of papers shuffling in the background. "You need 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 for civil rights violations, Section 3604 of the Fair Housing Act for discrimination, Section 3617 for intimidation and retaliation. Can you prove all three?" "Yes, plus wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. 1343. They falsified federal subsidy applications while discriminating against the populations those subsidies were meant to serve." Jesus. That's 10 years federal mandatory. That's accountability. Thomas went quiet, the kind of silence that meant he was adding up implications and not liking the sum. "They'll come after you, discredit you, dig into your past, make this about anything except what they did. Let them try. Marcus, I mean it. Corporate defense attorneys are vicious. They'll make you the villain." Marcus thought about the elevator, about Victoria clutching her purse tighter, about Maya being told to learn her place, about 73 families who'd given up hope because the system was designed to make them give up. "I've been invisible for 4 years, Thomas. Invisible is safe, but my daughter deserves better than safe." The termination came on a Tuesday, 3 weeks into Marcus's evidence gathering. His supervisor pulled him aside before the shift started, apologetic but firm. "Corporate wants to see you. HR now." The 17th floor felt different when summoned rather than working. Fluorescent lights harsh instead of dim, every surface cold instead of merely expensive. Janet Kim waited in the conference room, Victoria standing by the window like a general surveying battlefield terrain. "Mr. Reynolds, we're terminating your employment effective immediately." Marcus sat without being invited, the gesture small but significant. "On what grounds?" Victoria turned from the window, her voice controlled. "Insubordination. You violated elevator policy, ignored direct instructions from management, created an uncomfortable work environment." "I'd like that in writing. With specific policy citations and dates." "You'll receive your final paycheck. We need your badge and access card. Security will escort you out." Marcus pulled both from his pocket, placing them on the table with care, but he didn't stand. California Labor Code, Section 201, requires 3 business days' notice for termination without cause. I'll finish my scheduled shifts through Thursday. Janet and Victoria exchanged glances, the calculation visible. Fight over 3 days or risk whatever legal action he might take for improper termination? Fine. Thursday is your last shift. Don't access any files or databases. Your network privileges are revoked. Understood. Marcus stood, nodded once, and walked out with his dignity intact. They'd shown their hand. Now he could show his. The park bench offered privacy and sunshine in equal measure. Thomas Chen arrived with a briefcase that looked too heavy for recreational meetings, his face grave. "I did some digging like you asked. Marcus, this goes deeper than one company." He spread documents across the bench between them. Corporate filings, board member lists, property management databases. 8 companies, same ownership structure, same discrimination patterns. Preston and Associates isn't alone. There's a network, coordinated effort to maintain certain neighborhoods as economically and racially exclusive. They've been doing it for 30 years. The scope staggered even Marcus's prepared cynicism. Not one bad actor, but systemic conspiracy, wealth and racism intertwined so thoroughly that dismantling one meant confronting both. How did this stay hidden? Money, ND, as that cost more than lawsuits. Politicians who benefit from property tax revenue. Media that doesn't investigate real estate unless there's scandal. And victims who couldn't afford to keep fighting. Until now. Thomas closed the briefcase, his expression worried. "You understand what you're taking on? This isn't just Victoria Ashford. It's institutional. People with real power who won't go down quietly." Marcus looked across the park where children played, their laughter carrying on air that smelled like spring and possibility. Maya loved this park, loved the swings that made her feel like flying. That's exactly why it matters. The housing advocacy lawyer met him at her office after hours. Maria Gonzalez reviewing his compiled evidence with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen too many cases fall apart on technicalities. "I've represented 12 families against Preston, all settled with NDAs. They didn't know the pattern. We do now." Maria looked up, her eyes sharp with the kind of hope that lawyers learn not to trust but can't quite abandon. "Are you suggesting a federal class action? With Department of Justice investigation, housing discrimination, wire fraud, conspiracy to violate civil rights. That's ambitious. Who are you, Marcus?" He'd kept his background quiet for 2 years, letting people assume what they wanted, but Maria needed to know what she was walking into. "Former assistant U.S. attorney. Prosecuted civil rights cases for 8 years before my wife died." Maria's expression shifted, the pieces clicking into place. "You've been planning this. I've been documenting this. There's a difference." She gathered the evidence files, already mentally organizing them into legal arguments. "When do we file?" 1 week. I need time to prepare Maya. She deserves to know why her father's about to become very publicly unemployed." The night before the hearing, Marcus organized everything in banker boxes labeled by exhibit number. 2 years of work distilled into evidence so overwhelming that denial would require willful blindness. His apartment looked like a law office, every surface covered with documents that would end careers and start investigations. Maya appeared in the doorway, pajamas decorated with planets and stars, her gap-toothed smile uncertain. "Dad, you haven't slept." Tomorrow is important. Baby. She crossed to where he knelt sorting papers, her small hand finding his shoulder. Are you scared? The question deserved honesty. Marcus met her eyes, seeing Sarah in every expression, every gesture, every moment of courage his daughter showed without knowing how brave she was. No, I'm ready. Will they listen? He pulled her close, breathing in shampoo and childhood, and the future he was fighting to give her. They'll have no choice. Maya hugged him tight, fierce in the way only 8-year-olds can be, as if belief alone could reshape reality. Maybe it could. Maybe that's what justice required. Enough people believing so hard that the world had no choice but to change. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything. She padded back to bed, leaving Marcus alone with boxes of evidence and photographs of a woman who'd taught him that love and justice weren't opposing forces. That fighting for one meant fighting for both. He pulled his bar association card from the drawer where it had lived for 4 years, the plastic still smooth, the photo still recognizable. Marcus J. Reynolds, attorney at law. Sarah smiled from her frame across the room, her expression saying what she always said, "You know what's right. Do it." Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, invisibility would end. Tomorrow, 73 families would learn someone had been fighting for them all along. But tonight, Marcus Reynolds let himself be a father, getting ready to show his daughter what dignity looked like when you refused to compromise it for comfort or safety or quiet. He packed the last box and turned off the lights. The city glowed beyond his window, thousands of buildings where justice might or might not live, but where tomorrow it would at least knock on the door loudly enough that someone would have to answer. Marcus advanced to Exhibit E, the moment he'd been building toward for 2 years. The USB drive Thomas had helped authenticate contained audio from March 2023, legally recorded during Marcus's overnight shift when company policy required security presence at executive meetings. Your Honor, this is Ms. Ashford's voice during a regional directors meeting. The recording includes 17 executives discussing tenant selection criteria. Victoria's attorney shot to his feet. Objection! We haven't authenticated. Voice analysis completed by FBI Forensic Lab. Our report attached as Exhibit E1. Marcus pressed play. The conference room speakers crackled, then Victoria's voice filled the space with damning clarity. Property values depend on demographic consistency. I don't care about income levels or credit scores. If applicants don't match our existing tenant profile, find acceptable reasons for rejection, cultural fit, community standards, lifestyle compatibility. Learn the language that protects us. Another voice, male, uncertain. What if they challenge the rejection? Victoria again, confident, practiced. Offer settlements. NDAs cost less than litigation. We've managed this successfully for 6 years. Judge Thompson's expression hardened into granite. Marcus let the silence expand, let the words settle into the court record like sediment that would never wash away. So Victoria had gone from pale to gray, her hands flat against the table, as if the wood could anchor her against what came next. Ms. Ashford, Marcus said, his voice carrying that particular calm that made every word land with force. You asked me in an elevator why I quote housing law. She couldn't meet his eyes. I prosecuted discrimination cases for 8 years, argued before federal judges, sent executives to prison for civil rights violations, built cases that changed policy across 3 states. The courtroom leaned forward collectively. Then my wife died. and I chose my daughter over my career. Took night shift security to be home when Maya woke up, to make breakfast, to help with homework, to be present for the childhood that goes too fast already. His voice never rose, but something in it shifted, personal becoming universal, one man's story becoming everyone's. But you saw a black man in a uniform and assumed limitation, assumed I belonged in service elevators, assumed my knowledge was inappropriate, assumed I couldn't possibly be anything except what your bias told you I was. Victoria's lawyer tried once more, desperation cracking his professional veneer. Your Honor, this is character assassination. This is evidence, Marcus cut in. Exhibit F, testimony from Rosa Martinez, Preston's former HR director. The monitor flickered to life. Rosa's face filled the screen, recorded testimony given under oath 3 days prior. I was trained to reject applicants using coded language. Urban background meant black. Traditional family values meant straight and white. Community compatibility meant keep the neighborhood segregated. Everyone knew. Management knew. Corporate knew. We all knew. And we did it anyway, because quarterly earnings mattered more than people. Rosa's voice broke, but she continued. 73 families. I remember their faces, remember their children, remember thinking, someday someone will make this right. I just didn't have the courage to be that someone. Marcus stopped the video. But 73 families had the courage to trust me with their stories. 73 families who earned the right to housing through work and sacrifice, only to be told in 1,000 subtle ways they weren't good enough. He turned to Victoria directly, the moment crystallizing into something that would be cited in legal briefs and civil rights textbooks for decades. My dignity is not for sale, Ms. Ashford. Neither is my daughter's. Neither is theirs. Judge Thompson removed her glasses, cleaning them with deliberate care while the implications washed over the courtroom like a wave that couldn't be stopped. I'm issuing a preliminary injunction effective immediately. Preston and Associates will cease all leasing activities pending full DOJ investigation. Victoria's attorney managed 2 words before the judge's raised hand silenced him. I'm also referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Wire fraud, conspiracy to violate civil rights under 18 U.S.C. 241, and about 6 other charges I'm certain they'll discover during prosecution. The gavel came down, not loud, but final. Afternoon sun felt different on the courthouse steps, warm against Marcus's face in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. News vans clustered like birds, cameras swiveling, reporters shouting questions that blended into white noise. One voice cut through, a young woman pushing forward with a microphone. Mr. Reynolds, some are calling you a hero. What made you risk everything? Marcus thought of Maya asking why people think we're different. Thought of 73 families who'd stopped believing anyone cared. Thought of Sarah's photograph watching him choose courage over comfort every single morning. I'm not a hero. I'm a father who refused to teach my daughter that dignity is something you negotiate. The camera lights felt like punctuation on a sentence 2 years in the writing. By evening, the story had metastasized across every news platform. CNN showed federal agents entering Preston Tower, cardboard boxes stacked on dollies. Local stations interviewed former tenants, the floodgates finally opening. MSNBC ran analysis pieces about systemic discrimination, using Marcus's case as the framework. Victoria Ashford's resignation came at 6:47 p.m. via press release, her board of directors following within hours. The company stock crashed 47% before trading halted, billions in paper wealth evaporating like morning mist. Marcus watched from his apartment couch, Maya asleep against his side, her science project finally complete on the table. The blue ribbon she'd win next week already seemed inevitable, just another piece of the future clicking into place. Federal prosecutors moved fast, perhaps sensing momentum, perhaps driven by evidence too comprehensive to ignore. 3 months dissolved into a cascade of consequences. $47 million in damages distributed to 73 families, $30 million more for oversight and reform. The checks went out on a Tuesday. Marcus stood at the back of the community center, watching families hold paper that represented more than money, represented being heard, being believed, being valued. One mother approached afterward, tears cutting tracks through makeup. "My son starts at his new school Monday. Better district, better opportunities, because you saw us. Because you were brave enough to tell your story when nobody was listening. We told it for years. You made them hear." That distinction mattered more than verdicts or settlements or policy changes spreading across 3 states like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Rosa Martinez stood near the exit, wearing a badge that read State Fair Housing Compliance Officer. She'd testified, cooperated fully, turned evidence into something prosecutors could use. The state had hired her to prevent what she'd once helped perpetuate. Thomas Chen and Maria Gonzalez opened a civil rights practice together. 200 intake calls in 3 months. Other cities asking how to replicate the investigation. Victoria herself appeared in news footage, court-mandated community service at a fair housing nonprofit, her expression carrying something that might have been remorse, or might have been the recognition that comfort and complicity weren't so different after all. 6 months later, Maya's science project dominated the State Fair Gymnasium. Principles of Flight, Why Metal Birds Don't Fall. Her name written in careful letters, her explanations mixing childhood wonder with the precision Marcus had taught her during 2 years of early mornings and late nights. The blue ribbon hung from the display board, and Maya held it like proof that hard work mattered, that believing in yourself mattered, that having a father who showed you both could matter most of all. Marcus stood among parents who actually saw him now, who knew his name, who'd formed opinions he'd never asked for but couldn't avoid. Some thought him brave, some thought him vindictive, most thought both, and he'd learned to live with complexity. "Mr. Reynolds, your daughter's work is exceptional." The teacher was new, young, probably too idealistic for this job, but maybe that was exactly what schools needed. "She worked hard. She told me you helped her understand aerodynamics. That's impressive. She asks good questions. I just try to answer them." They drove to the coast afterward, sunset painting the Pacific in shades of gold that didn't have names. Maya ran toward the water, arms spread like wings, her laughter carrying on wind that tasted like salt and future. The new apartment was 2-bedroom, better neighborhood, $1,400 monthly rent that felt reasonable now. Marcus's consulting work with the DOJ paid well enough that the Camry's check engine light had been fixed. The bank account showed 5 figures. The constant calculations of poverty had faded to memory. Sarah's photograph sat on the new mantel, so her smile somehow fitting better in this space where breathing didn't require constant vigilance. Maya ran back breathless, her dress soaked with spray, her expression bright with the kind of joy that made everything worthwhile. "Dad, can people fly if they try hard enough?" Marcus knelt to her level, the gesture as natural now as breathing, as necessary as the tide pulling at their feet. "We don't need to fly, sweetheart. We just need to refuse to be invisible. The sun touched the horizon, and somewhere back in the city, 73 families were unpacking boxes in homes they'd been told weren't meant for them. Somewhere, policy was being rewritten, training updated, systems examined for the rot that hid in coded language and unconscious bias. But here, day on this beach with his daughter's hand warm in his, and the future suddenly large enough to hold them both, Marcus let himself believe in forces that kept things airborne when gravity said they should fall. I'm glad you fought, Dad. Mom would be proud. I'm glad you showed me how. The waves rolled in with the patience of something that understood time differently, that knew change came in increments and tides and the slow reshaping of coastlines. Maya chased foam and light, and Marcus understood what Sarah had always known, that dignity isn't something you achieve or acquire, but something you are, something you teach through example, something you protect even when the cost feels unbearable. Especially then. The drive home felt different, the road familiar but transformed by knowing they'd earned the right to be here, not through compromise or silence, but through refusing to accept that justice was something you only got if you fit the right demographic profile. Tomorrow Marcus would consult on another case, another city, another pattern of discrimination waiting to be exposed. Tomorrow Victoria would continue her community service, rehabilitation that might take or might not, but at least represented acknowledgement. Tomorrow the work would continue, because the work always continued. But tonight, he tucked Maya into her own room, helped her hang the state championship ribbon above her desk, listened to her breathing even out into the rhythm of childhood dreams that might now include futures her mother never got to see. Tonight, he was simply a father who'd refused to let his daughter inherit invisibility, and that, Marcus thought as exhaustion finally claimed him in a bed that didn't creak, in an apartment that didn't feel temporary, was the only victory that couldn't be taken away. Because dignity, like flight, wasn't about never falling. It was about refusing to believe you were meant to.